Everyone in the snow-covered square froze the moment police sirens shattered the bright winter calm. Sunlight reflected off the white ground as three officers advanced, boots crunching through fresh snow, their faces tight, their voices cold. But what stole the breath from everyone watching was the German shepherd at their side. A powerful dog, black and tan, fully trained, muscles coiled, eyes locked on a single target, a man standing alone beneath the winter sun. He wore a Navy working uniform, digital camouflage from head to toe, despite the fact that his service had ended years ago. A retired Navy SEAL, calm, still, hands relaxed at his sides as if the cold and the tension meant nothing to him. "Don't move," one officer shouted. Then came the command no one expected to hear. "At 9, take him down!" The man didn't run. He didn't fight. "I don't understand," he said quietly. "I haven't done anything wrong." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Shoppers stopped mid-step. A mother pulled her child closer. Why would police order an attack on a quiet veteran standing in the open, in broad daylight? Then, everything went wrong. The German shepherd lunged forward, but not at the man. Instead, the dog skidded through the snow and threw himself in front of the retired SEAL, standing guard, body tense, eyes burning, protecting him like a soldier protecting his last brother. The officers froze. Whispers broke out. Panic crept into their voices. Why would a trained police dog refuse a direct order? Who was this man that made the dog choose loyalty over command? And what secret from the past had just resurfaced in the middle of a bright winter day? Stay with us, because this story doesn't just expose the truth about a dog. It reveals the kind of loyalty no uniform can erase. Before we begin, make sure to like and subscribe. And tell me, where are you watching from today? Drop your country in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Minneapolis in winter looked like a city carved from clean white stone, bright and unforgiving under a pale sun. Overnight snow had sealed the streets in a fresh crust that glittered like ground glass, and the cold sat low over everything, quiet, heavy, and patient, the way a wolf waits at the edge of a campfire. Even in daylight, the wind found the gaps between buildings, sliding through alleys and across bridges with a thin, cutting hiss that made people tuck their chins into scarves and walk faster. The sky was clear enough to be beautiful, which made the temperature feel like a joke told by a cruel god, blue above, ice below. Breath rose in quick ghosts, metal handrails stung bare skin. Car tires whispered over packed snow, and every step on the sidewalk spoke a crisp, brittle language. Crunch, crunch, crunch. In the heart of downtown, a wide public square opened up like a stage, stone benches half buried, planters rimmed with frost, a low fountain turned off for the season, its basin filled with wind-sculpted snow. People crossed it with shopping bags and coffee cups, collars up, eyes narrowed against the glare. A few early joggers moved like bright punctuation marks in the white, and pigeons bobbed in tight circles near scattered crumbs, as if they'd learned to bargain with winter instead of fight it. Through all of it walked Michael Carter, steady as a metronome, as if the cold had signed a treaty with him years ago and never dared break it. He was 35, built with the compact strength of someone who had carried heavy things for long distances without complaint, and he moved with the same quiet economy. No wasted motion, no dramatic gestures, just purpose. His face had hard lines around the mouth and eyes, not from anger, but from long attention. The kind of focus that becomes permanent after too many nights listening for danger. A short, neat beard shadowed his jaw, dark against weather-worn skin that had seen sun in other places and now looked slightly roughened by northern wind. His hair was kept close, practical, a shade of brown that nearly matched the winter branches. His eyes were gray-blue, calm on the surface, restless underneath, like a lake that never fully stops moving. People rarely guessed what had shaped him. They only sensed it the way animals do, something disciplined, something quiet, something that didn't startle easily. Michael had been a Navy SEAL once, retired, technically. The word retired sounded to him like a soft chair, like surrender, like something that belonged to men who forgot how to scan a crowd without thinking. He still wore his Navy working uniform even now, digital camouflage across the entire jacket, front placket, chest area, and pocket flaps, no solid color panels anywhere, the pattern continuous and exact, as if the fabric itself refused to let him hide a simpler life underneath. Some mornings, strangers looked at him and frowned, as if unsure whether to thank him, avoid him, or ask him to pose for a picture. Michael never offered explanations. The uniform was not a costume to him. It was a habit stitched into muscle memory, a promise to himself that he would stay ready because the world had a way of proving readiness useful at inconvenient times. He wasn't out here for attention. He was out here because he couldn't sit still in a warm room while the city woke up in silence, because movement kept his thoughts from piling up like snowdrifts, because walking the same route every morning made the day feel like something he could map, and mapping made him feel safe. Beside him padded a German shepherd with traditional black and tan coloring, natural, clean, and striking against the white ground like a flame outlined in ash. The dog was about 4 years old, large and athletic, with a broad chest and powerful shoulders built for work, not show. His coat was thick for the season, sable black along the back and face, warm tan on the legs and underside, the classic pattern that made passers-by think police dog, even before they noticed the posture. His ears stood alert most of the time, swiveling to catch the small noises of the city. A bus exhaling at a stop, a skateboard clattering somewhere under a skyway, the distant chime of a crossing signal. His eyes were amber brown and unusually expressive, smart, yes, but also haunted in a way that made Michael's chest tighten the first day they met. The dog's name was Ranger, though Michael had not been the one to give it. The name sat on the dog like an old medal, earned, worn, and meaningful, even if no one in the square knew why. Ranger walked close to Michael's left leg, not crowding him, not weaving, just present with the patient loyalty of an animal that had learned the value of staying near the one person who felt like home. When the wind sharpened, Ranger angled his body slightly so it cut across Michael's path first, as if he could shield a man from weather the way he might shield him from something worse. Michael sometimes talked to him in a low voice, not babying, not performing affection, but speaking the way one soldier speaks to another when words are less important than tone. "Easy," he'd murmur when a delivery truck backfired. "Good," he'd say when Ranger ignored a squirrel. "Stay much quiet," he'd add when a crowd thickened. Ranger seemed to understand those phrases like prayers. If anyone asked where the dog came from, Michael said the truth in the simplest way. He found me. And that was the strangest part. It had felt true in a way that made logic irrelevant. 3 days earlier, Ranger had appeared at the edge of a snowy side street near a small cafe Michael used to pass. Limping slightly, ribs faintly visible beneath winter fur, paws caked with salt and ice, the dog had watched Michael with an intensity that was both wary and desperate. When Michael took a cautious step forward, Ranger didn't run. He'd lowered his head, as if bracing for rejection, and then, slowly, had moved close enough for Michael to see the old scar line near the base of his right ear, thin and pale beneath the fur. Michael had reached out, palm down, letting the dog choose the distance. Ranger had sniffed, exhaled, and pressed his forehead gently into Michael's hand as if sealing a pact. Since then, the dog had followed him everywhere without needing a leash to be understood, though Michael used one in public anyway because the world liked rules and didn't trust miracles. Animal control had been an obvious thought. But the first time Michael tried to approach a city worker near a patrol vehicle, Ranger had panicked, body low, breath fast, eyes wide, leaning into Michael's leg as if the sight of a uniformed stranger meant cages and separation. Michael had changed his mind, not because he wanted to steal a dog, but because the dog's fear was too specific to ignore. A dog doesn't flinch like that for no reason. And Michael, for all his silence, had spent a lifetime learning to respect fear as information rather than weakness. So he brought Ranger home, fed him, cleaned the salt from his paws, and watched him sleep in a tight curl near the door like a sentry who didn't know how to stand down. In the mornings, they walked. In the afternoons, they walked again. It was their new ritual. 2 figures moving through the city's bright cold, one man carrying the weight of a past he didn't speak about, one dog carrying a mystery in the way he watched every street corner as if he expected something to step out. That morning, the square was busier than usual. A small winter market had set up near the center. Portable stalls, a few strings of lights that looked cheerful against the ice, vendors in thick gloves selling pastries and hot cider. The smell of cinnamon drifted across the air, bright and fleeting. Michael moved through the crowd with an instinctive awareness, shoulders relaxed but attention wide, scanning faces without staring, tracking hands and pockets and the subtle patterns of movement that told you whether someone was lost or hunting. Ranger kept pace, calm on the outside, but Michael could feel small shifts through the leash, tiny corrections, a slight pause, a head tilt toward a sound. A group of teenagers laughed near a bench, their voices bouncing off the cold stone, and Ranger flicked an ear but didn't react. A woman in a long navy coat stepped aside to let them pass. She had pale skin flushed pink from the cold, dark hair tucked into a knit hat, and tired eyes that looked older than her face. She smiled briefly at Ranger, the kind of smile someone gives when they miss a dog they once loved, then hurried on. Michael didn't know her name, and he didn't need to. The city was full of passing stories. He and Ranger had their own. Near the far edge of the square, where a row of buildings cast a sharper shadow across the snow, an alley opened like a thin mouth between brick walls. The alley was piled with wind-blown drifts, clean at the surface, but the kind of place where the sun didn't linger. Michael would have walked past it without thought. He'd walked this route 100 times, except Ranger stopped so suddenly that the leash went taut. The dog's body stiffened, shoulders lifting, tail lowered in a controlled line. His ears angled forward, and a low rumble began deep in his chest, not loud enough to cause a scene, but clear enough to be felt through the air like distant thunder. Michael halted instantly, because he trusted Ranger's instincts more than the comfort of routine. "What is it?" he asked quietly, voice steady as if speaking to the wind itself. Ranger didn't look at him. His eyes were fixed on the alley, the dark cut between buildings, the drifted snow, the stillness that seemed too carefully arranged. The growl sharpened into something focused, a warning shaped by training rather than fear. People continued walking behind them, unaware, stepping around as if they were just another pair, pausing to admire the market. But Michael's attention narrowed, and the old part of him, the part that never fully retired, woke like a blade sliding free. He shifted his weight slightly, placing himself between Ranger and the open square, not to restrain the dog, but to anchor him. Ranger's nostrils flared. His jaw tightened. The dog's gaze didn't just suggest danger, it suggested recognition, as if something in that alley carried a scent from another life, another place, another kind of cold. Michael followed Ranger's stare, and for a moment he saw nothing but snow and shadow. Then, barely, he noticed a disturbance at the edge of the drift, a subtle line where the snow didn't sit naturally, like something had moved through it recently. Ranger's growl deepened, controlled and deliberate, as if he were telling Michael, not yet, not alone, not unprepared. Michael's fingers tightened around the leash, his breath fogged in front of him, and the bright winter sun suddenly felt less friendly, like it was watching from a distance. Somewhere inside the alley, something shifted. So faint it might have been the wind, so precise it might have been a footstep. Ranger didn't bark. He didn't lunge. He simply held his ground, head slightly lowered, eyes locked, the posture of a soldier who has identified a threat and is waiting for the next move. Michael's heart didn't race. It slowed, the way it always did when the world asked him to choose between walking away and stepping in. He leaned closer to Ranger, voice barely above the city's hush. "Easy," he whispered. "Stay." Ranger trembled once, not from fear, but from the effort of restraint, and the low growl continued like a warning line drawn in sound. Michael stared into the alley's shadow until his eyes ached. The square behind him kept living. Laughter, footsteps, the clink of cups, bright life under bright sun. But the alley remained dark, silent, waiting. And Michael understood, with a chill that had nothing to do with the weather, that whatever was hidden in that cold pocket of the city had seen them first, and Ranger knew it. Michael didn't pull on the leash. He knew better than that. When Ranger stopped, it wasn't hesitation. It was decision. The German shepherd stood planted in the snow at the edge of the square, muscles tight beneath his thick black and tan coat, weight subtly shifted forward like a loaded spring. His tail was low, but rigid, not tucked, not wagging. His ears were locked on the alley, and the low sound in his chest deepened, controlled, disciplined. This was not a dog startled by noise or shadow. This was a dog preparing for contact. Michael crouched slightly, bringing himself closer without breaking eye level with the alley. "Easy," he said again, the word measured, calm, the same tone he'd used on men half his age holding rifles with shaking hands. Ranger didn't turn his head. He didn't soften. The growl didn't stop. Instead, the dog took one slow step sideways, placing his body squarely in front of Michael's legs. It was a deliberate move, one Michael recognized instantly. Shielding, not instinct alone, but training refined into muscle memory. A few people nearby noticed. A middle-aged man with a coffee paused mid-step, brows furrowing as he took in the scene. A jogger slowed, pulling out one earbud. A woman selling pastries glanced up from her stall, her smile fading as she followed the dog's line of sight toward the alley. Nothing dramatic was happening yet, but the air had changed. It was the kind of subtle shift Michael had learned to trust, the moment when the world leaned just slightly off balance. Michael straightened slowly, eyes still forward. He scanned reflections in nearby windows, checked the movement at the far end of the square, noted who was behind him and who wasn't. Ranger's posture told him one thing clearly. Whatever was coming wasn't just in the alley anymore. It was closer. The sound reached them before the sight did. Tires crunching over packed snow, the low idle of an engine slowing, deliberate, unhurried. A police cruiser rolled into view at the edge of the square, white and black stark against the winter brightness, lights off but presence unmistakable. It didn't rush. It didn't blare a siren. It coasted in like a predator that already believed the chase was over. Ranger's reaction was immediate. The growl sharpened. His shoulders rose, hackles lifting just enough to ripple the fur along his spine. He stepped fully in front of Michael now, chest out, legs braced, head slightly lowered. Michael felt the leash tighten as Ranger claimed space. This wasn't fear. Michael had seen fear in dogs. High, frantic energy, scattered eyes, wasted motion. This was warning. Michael's jaw tightened. "Ranger," he said quietly. The dog didn't respond to his name. Not disobedience, priority. The cruiser stopped 10 yards away. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out, tall and broad-shouldered, his winter police jacket zipped high, utility belt heavy at his waist. He looked to be in his early 40s, face square and pale from the cold, hair cut short under a dark-knit cap. His movements were practiced, confident, the kind that came from years of believing the uniform would answer questions before he had to. He scanned the square, eyes flicking to Michael, then locking onto Ranger. Something unreadable crossed his face. Behind him, the passenger door opened. Another officer emerged, younger, slimmer, with a sharper jawline and a hint of hesitation in the way he adjusted his gloves. He glanced from the dog to Michael, then back to the dog, as if recalibrating what he thought he was seeing. A third figure remained inside the cruiser, indistinct through the windshield. "Sir," the first officer called out, voice firm but not raised, "can you keep your dog under control?" Michael didn't answer immediately. He studied the man's stance, the angle of his feet, the way his hand hovered near, but not on, his belt. He noticed how the officer's gaze never quite left Ranger. "He is under control," Michael replied at last, voice even. Ranger growled again, deeper this time, a vibration that seemed to travel through the snow. The younger officer shifted his weight, unease flickering across his face. "That's a German Shepherd," he said quietly to his partner. "Looks trained." The first officer nodded once, eyes narrowing. "Sir," he said again, this time sharper, "I'm going to need you to step away from the animal." That did it. Ranger moved, not forward, not back. He widened his stance and leaned subtly into Michael's legs, pressing his body there like an anchor. His head lifted, eyes burning now, fixed on the first officer with an intensity that made several bystanders step back instinctively. Michael felt the contact, solid, intentional. Ranger wasn't just blocking him from the officers, he was telling him something. "I'm not stepping away," Michael said calmly. "You want to talk? You talk to me." A ripple moved through the small crowd that had gathered. Phones came out, not dramatically, but cautiously, the way people do when they sense something might turn important. The pastry vendor, Sarah, according to the name stitched on her apron, watched with open concern. She was in her early 30s, tall and slim, dark hair pulled into a loose bun beneath a wool hat, her pale skin reddened by cold and long mornings outdoors. She held a paper cup of cider forgotten in her hand, eyes moving between the officers and the dog. She wasn't afraid yet, but she was alert, the way someone gets when a normal day starts slipping off its rails. "Sir," the first officer said, his tone hardening, "that dog is displaying aggressive behavior." Ranger's ears flattened briefly, not back in submission, but forward, sharpening his focus. His lips twitched, not baring teeth, but preparing to. Michael felt a familiar heat rise behind his ribs. "He hasn't moved toward you," Michael said. "He hasn't barked. He hasn't lunged. That's not aggression." The younger officer swallowed. "He's guarding," he said under his breath, almost to himself. The first officer shot him a look. "We've had reports," he said, louder now, for the benefit of the onlookers. "A large German shepherd matching this description, possibly a former K9, unaccounted for." Ranger's body went rigid at the word K9. The reaction was unmistakable. His head snapped a fraction to the side, then back to the officer, as if a switch had been flipped. Michael felt it too, a tightening in his chest that had nothing to do with cold. "Former," Michael repeated. "You're saying he belonged to the department?" The first officer didn't answer directly. "Sir, for your safety and ours, you need to step away now." He raised his hand slightly, not a weapon, but a signal. The third officer finally exited the cruiser. He was older than the other two, late 40s maybe, with a weathered face and graying beard visible above his collar. His eyes went straight to Ranger, widening just a touch before narrowing with professional focus. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Ranger's growl changed again. It dropped lower, steadier, like a warning line being drawn in the snow. He took a half step forward, just enough to make his intent clear, then stopped himself. Michael placed a hand on the dog's back, fingers sinking into thick fur. Ranger didn't flinch. He didn't break eye contact. He accepted the touch as reinforcement, not restraint. "Ranger," Michael murmured, barely audible. The dog's breathing steadied, but his stance did not change. The first officer's jaw clenched. "This is your last warning," he said. "Step away from the dog." Michael met his gaze, expression unreadable. "No," he said simply. A hush fell over the square. Even the wind seemed to pause. Somewhere a pigeon fluttered up, startled by the tension. The younger officer shifted again, uncertainty now plain on his face. "Sir," he said, quieter, "maybe we should slow this down." "We don't have time," the first officer snapped. He turned slightly toward the older man. "Get ready." Whatever the signal was, Ranger recognized it before Michael did. The dog's muscles coiled, every line of his body screaming readiness, not to attack, but to intercept. Michael felt a cold certainty settle in his gut. This wasn't a misunderstanding spiraling out of control. This was something else, something planned. The cruiser's engine idled behind them, a low, constant growl that mirrored Ranger's own. Snow glittered under the winter sun, painfully bright, as if the day itself refused to look away. Michael tightened his grip on the leash, not to pull, but to stay connected. He leaned down just enough for his voice to reach Ranger's ear. "I'm here," he said. Ranger didn't look back. He didn't need to. He already knew. The first officer opened his mouth to speak again, and Ranger shifted his weight forward, just a fraction, enough to make the message unmistakable. The dog would not move aside. Whoever was coming, whatever they thought they were doing, Ranger had already chosen his position. And as the officers advanced one cautious step at a time, Michael realized with a clarity that cut through the cold. Ranger wasn't reacting to the uniform. He was reacting to the men inside it. The officers advanced together, their boots pressing shallow, deliberate impressions into the glittering snow. The sun sat high enough to cast sharp shadows across the square, making everything painfully clear. Faces, breath, posture, intention. Nothing about this moment could hide in darkness. The first officer led, his shoulders squared, chin lifted, the kind of man who believed decisiveness was the same thing as righteousness. His name patch read Briggs, and it fit him. Hard consonants, no softness. Briggs had a face cut from straight lines, a broad jaw shadowed by stubble that never quite grew into a beard, pale winter skin stretched tight over cheekbones, thin lips pressed flat as if words were a tool he rationed. His eyes were a flat, watchful brown, trained to assess threats quickly and move on. People like Briggs did not enjoy ambiguity. They crushed it. The younger officer stayed half a step behind him, matching pace but not conviction. Evan Morales looked to be in his late 20s, lean and wiry, with dark hair visible beneath his cap and a narrow scar along his left eyebrow, an old cut that had healed crooked, giving his face a permanently questioning expression. Morales had the posture of someone still learning where he stood in the world, shoulders tense, eyes alert but searching. He glanced at Ranger again, then at Michael, and his jaw tightened as if something inside him didn't line up with the script he'd been handed. The third officer, Thomas Hale, moved last. Hale was older, late 40s, thick through the chest, his beard peppered with gray and trimmed close. His eyes were sharp and calculating, the kind that missed very little, but his face carried a fatigue that came from too many winners on the job. Hale's hands stayed low and open, not hovering near his belt. He watched Ranger with professional interest rather than alarm. When Hale spoke, if he spoke at all, people listened. But for now, he said nothing. "Sir," Briggs said, stopping just outside Ranger's reach. His voice carried easily across the square, practiced and controlled. "That dog matches the description of a K9 involved in a serious incident. You need to step away from it immediately." The word incident hung in the cold air like a stain. Michael felt Ranger's back tense under his hand. The dog's ears twitched at the word K9 again, but this time his reaction was sharper, more focused, as if the sound unlocked something buried deeper than fear. "You keep saying that," Michael replied. His voice remained calm, but something steeled beneath it. "You haven't said what the incident was." Briggs' eyes flicked briefly to Hale, then back to Michael. "Internal matter," he said. "Not for civilian discussion." A murmur rippled through the bystanders. Sarah, the pastry vendor, had stepped closer to the edge of her stall, cider cup now abandoned on the counter. Her brows were drawn together, dark eyes fixed on the dog. She wasn't recording. She was watching, the way people do when they sense the truth might be fragile. Ranger growled again, lower, slower, vibrating through his chest like a warning drum. He adjusted his stance, angling his body even more squarely between Michael and Briggs. The precision of the movement made Morales's breath hitch. "Sir," Morales said quietly, leaning toward Briggs, "that's not uncontrolled behavior. That's trained guarding." Briggs shot him a sharp look. "I didn't ask for your evaluation." Morales flushed, jaw tightening, but he didn't look away from Ranger. Hale's gaze narrowed slightly. "He's right about one thing," Hale said at last, his voice gravelly, measured. "That dog's holding position." Briggs's mouth tightened. Holding position or not, he's classified as unstable. Ranger's head lifted at the word unstable. His eyes locked on Briggs with a sudden, searing intensity that made several people gasp. Michael felt it too, a shift so abrupt it was almost audible, like a blade sliding free of its sheath. "Unstable dogs don't wait," Michael said. "They react." Briggs took a step closer. "Sir, this is your final warning. Step away from the animal." Michael didn't move. Instead, he straightened fully, the winter sun glinting off the digital pattern of his Navy working uniform. The camouflage broke up his outline, but there was nothing hidden about his stance. Feet planted, shoulders back, presence unmistakable. People noticed the uniform now. Whispers spread. Navy, SEAL, veteran. Briggs noticed too. His eyes flicked over the patches, the cut of the fabric, the way Michael wore it, not like someone playing dress-up, but like someone who had never learned how to take it off. "You think that uniform gives you authority here?" Briggs asked. Michael met his gaze without blinking. "No," he said. "My dog does." Ranger's growl deepened, a sound that carried discipline rather than rage. Hale's expression changed then, just a fraction. He had seen that posture before, somewhere far from city squares and winter markets. He shifted his weight, reassessing. "Sir," Hale said, addressing Michael, "we received a report of a missing K9 unit. According to the file, the dog attacked a suspect during a raid and was deemed unsafe for continued service." The word attacked rippled through the crowd like a dropped glass. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Morales frowned. "That's not what the follow-up said," he muttered, almost to himself. Briggs' head snapped toward him. "What?" Morales hesitated, then squared his shoulders. The follow-up said the dog hesitated on command. Silence fell. Ranger froze, every muscle locked, his eyes flicked just once, from Briggs to Morales, then back. Michael felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. "Hesitated," Michael repeated. "That's different from attacking." Briggs's jaw clenched. "Hesitation gets people killed." Ranger shifted then, not forward, not back, but upward, lifting his head, chest expanding, posture transforming with startling clarity into something unmistakably military. His front legs locked, hind legs braced, spine straight. It was a stance Michael knew well, one he hadn't seen outside training grounds and battlefields. Morales's eyes widened. "Jesus," he whispered. Hale inhaled slowly. "That's not civilian obedience," he said. Briggs raised his hand sharply. "Enough," he turned to Hale. "Issue the command." Hale looked at him, long and hard. In that pause, the city seemed to hold its breath. Snow sparkled. A bus hissed in the distance. Somewhere a phone chimed. "Do it," Briggs snapped. Hale's eyes returned to Ranger. His voice, when it came, was steady but reluctant. "K9, he said, projecting authority. Ranger did not move. Not an inch. His gaze never left Briggs. "Stand down," Hale commanded. Ranger's ears flicked, acknowledging the sound, but his body remained locked in place. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Briggs's face flushed red beneath the cold. "He's refusing," Morales said softly. "He's not unstable," Michael said. "He's choosing." Briggs' patience snapped. "Fine," he barked. "Handler, prepare for separation." Hale's hand lifted halfway, then stopped. "Briggs," he said low, "this isn't going to go the way you think." Briggs ignored him. He turned back to Michael, voice booming now, fed by frustration and pride. "Sir, step away from the dog now, or we will intervene." Michael's fingers tightened slightly in Ranger's fur. He leaned down just enough for his voice to reach the dog alone. "Stay," he whispered. Ranger didn't need the command. He was already there. Briggs took a step forward. Ranger responded instantly. He didn't lunge. He didn't bark. He shifted his weight forward by a single, unmistakable inch, enough to draw a line in the snow that no one could pretend not to see. Morales stepped back without realizing it. Sarah's breath caught. Hale's eyes hardened. Briggs stopped short, boots inches from Ranger's reach. The dog's growl rose, deep and resonant, echoing off the stone benches. It was the sound of a soldier refusing an order he knew was wrong. Michael's heart slowed, the way it always did when the world narrowed to a single choice. He looked at Ranger, then back at Briggs. "Why?" Michael asked quietly. "Does a dog you call dangerous refuse to look at anyone here but you?" The question hung there, unanswered. Briggs' eyes flickered, just for a moment. Ranger saw it. The growl sharpened. And in that bright, frozen square, it became clear to everyone watching that this was no longer about a missing K9. It was about something the dog remembered, and someone he did not trust. The square felt smaller now, as if the bright winter light had tightened its grip around everyone standing there. Breath hung in the air, visible and shallow. The officers held their positions. The crowd leaned in without quite realizing it, and Ranger stood frozen in a posture so precise it looked sculpted rather than assumed. Michael could feel the dog's tension through the leash and through the contact of fur against his leg. Controlled, deliberate, waiting. He had learned long ago that moments like this were not solved by force or volume. They were solved by clarity. Michael shifted his weight and raised his right hand just slightly, keeping the movement so small it would have gone unnoticed by anyone not trained to see it. 2 fingers curled inward, then opened in a slow, deliberate arc, the gesture barely larger than the twitch of a shadow. It was not a command taught in obedience classes or police academies. It was older than that, born in dust and heat and the quiet chaos of operations that never made it into reports. Ranger reacted instantly. The transformation was startling. His stance changed with surgical precision. Front paws adjusted by inches, shoulders rolled forward, spine straightened, and his head lifted into a position of alert readiness that radiated discipline rather than aggression. The growl in his chest cut off mid-breath, replaced by a deep, steady silence. His eyes, once fixed narrowly on Briggs, softened and sharpened at the same time, as if a veil had been pulled back. A murmur rippled through the onlookers. Phones rose higher. Sarah's dark eyes widened, her mouth parting slightly as she whispered to no one, "How did he do that?" Morales stared openly now, disbelief etched across his young face. Hale's expression shifted from guarded to intent, the fatigue in his eyes replaced by something like recognition. Briggs noticed it too, and his confidence cracked just enough to show irritation beneath. "What did you just do?" Briggs demanded. Michael didn't answer. He lowered his hand and let it rest loosely at his side, his gaze never leaving Ranger. The dog held the new posture without wavering, muscles aligned, breathing slow and controlled. This was not a trick. It was recall. Something old and deeply buried had surfaced, summoned by a signal that bypassed fear and training alike. Hale took a cautious step closer, eyes scanning Ranger's body language. "That signal," he said slowly. "It's not standard." Michael finally looked up. "No," he replied. "It isn't." Briggs' jaw tightened. "You said you didn't train the dog." "I didn't," Michael said. Ranger's ears flicked at the sound of his voice, a subtle acknowledgement that did not break stance. Michael's chest tightened with a feeling he hadn't allowed himself to name yet. Hale exhaled through his nose. "Then how does he know it?" The question hung heavy in the cold air. Ranger's gaze drifted, not away from Briggs but through him, as if seeing something layered beneath the man's uniform. His breathing changed, quickening just slightly, and Michael felt a tremor run through the dog's body, the first hint of something unraveling. The memory did not arrive gently. It came in fragments, sharp and invasive, like shrapnel tearing through time. Ranger's ears flattened, not in submission, but as if bracing against an internal storm. His eyes glazed for a heartbeat, then refocused with startling intensity. Michael saw it before anyone else, the way Ranger's pupils dilated, the way his jaw clenched as if tasting dust instead of winter air. A sound escaped him, low and strained, not quite a whine, not quite a growl. Hale recognized it instantly. "That's stress recall," he murmured. "Combat conditioned." Briggs scoffed. "You're anthropomorphizing." Ranger's body shuddered once. Michael's hand rose again, slower this time, palm open, fingers spread in a calming arc that mirrored the first gesture but softened it. He didn't touch the dog yet. He remembered what panic could do if cornered too quickly. Ranger's breathing hitched, then steadied, then hitched again. His eyes flicked downward, unfocused, as if tracking something that wasn't there. The square around them blurred for him, and in its place came heat and noise and a sky the color of smoke. He smelled oil and metal and fear. He heard voices shouting in a language that was not words but urgency. His paws struck sand instead of snow, and his vest was heavier, tighter, wrapped with straps and equipment that pressed against old scars. He was running. Not away, never away. Running beside a man whose voice cut through everything else like a lifeline. "Stay close. I've got you." The memory surged forward without mercy. Ranger's muscles twitched as if he were sprinting, though his paws never moved. Michael saw it in the way the dog's shoulders bunched, the way his head angled as if scanning for threats invisible to everyone else. The crowd gasped when Ranger let out a short, broken sound that carried rawness rather than menace. Sarah's hands shook as she lowered her phone, eyes shining with something like tears. Morales swallowed hard. "He's reliving something," he said quietly. Briggs's face darkened. "Enough!" he snapped. "This is exactly why he was classified unstable." Hale rounded on him. "No," he said sharply. "This is exactly why he wasn't." Ranger's legs trembled now, the disciplined stance beginning to fracture under the weight of memory. Michael closed the distance at last, placing both hands firmly on the dog's shoulders, grounding him with steady pressure. "Ranger," he said, voice low and unwavering. The name cut through the storm. Ranger's head jerked slightly, eyes snapping back to the present, his breathing slowed by degrees, each exhale visible in the cold. Michael leaned in, forehead nearly touching the dog's. "You're here," he said softly. "You're safe." Ranger's ears lifted a fraction, torn between worlds. Then, slowly, he pressed his head into Michael's chest, the movement hesitant but desperate, like a soldier seeking cover after too long in the open. The crowd fell silent. Even Briggs didn't speak. Hale watched, jaw tight, eyes sharp with understanding. Morales's hands curled into fists at his sides. Ranger's body shook once more, then stilled, the storm receding but not gone. He stepped back into the guarding position, but now it was different, less rigid, more intentional. His eyes lifted again to Briggs, and this time the look was unmistakable. Recognition. Not friendly, not confused, certain. Michael felt it then, a cold line of certainty forming in his gut. "He knows you," Michael said quietly. Briggs laughed, a short, humorless sound. "That's absurd." Ranger growled, not loud but deep, resonant, aimed only at Briggs. Hale's eyes widened. "He's not reacting to all of us," he said slowly. "Just you." Briggs's smile vanished. "Coincidence?" Michael shook his head. "No," he said. "Memory." The word seemed to strike something fragile. Briggs's gaze flickered and Ranger caught it instantly. His growl sharpened, posture lowering just enough to signal readiness without attack. Phones rose again. Whispers spread. Sarah stepped forward despite herself. "That dog looks like he's protecting him," she said, voice trembling, nodding toward Michael. "But also like he's accusing someone." Briggs snapped, "Ma'am, step back." She didn't. Hale didn't make her. Ranger's attention never left Briggs, and in that unwavering focus lay a truth no one could ignore. Michael felt Ranger's breath against his ribs, steady now, resolute. He lifted his hand once more, this time making a different signal. 2 fingers tapped lightly against his own chest, then lowered. Ranger responded with a subtle shift, planting himself even more firmly between Michael and Briggs, body angled outward like a shield. It was not defense born of fear. It was defense born of loyalty remembered. Briggs's voice rose, brittle with anger. "This is over," he said. "We're taking the dog." Ranger took one measured step forward, stopping just short of Briggs' boots. His teeth didn't show. His eyes did not waver. The message was unmistakable. Michael felt the weight of the moment settle over them all. The memory beneath the fur had surfaced, and it was pointing somewhere dangerous, somewhere specific. And as the winter sun glinted off snow and badges alike, Michael realized this was no longer about where Ranger had come from. It was about what he remembered, and who he remembered it about. The square no longer felt like a public place. It felt like a courtroom without walls, where breath, memory, and truth were all on trial under a merciless winter sun. Ranger stood firm between Michael and Officer Briggs, his black and tan frame tense but controlled, amber eyes locked with a certainty that made denial feel childish. The dog's breath steamed in slow, steady bursts, each one measured as if he were counting time instead of seconds. Michael felt the weight of every gaze pressing into his back, civilians, officers, phones raised like quiet witnesses. There was nowhere left to stand except forward. He exhaled once, long and deliberate, then spoke. "You want to know why he responds to signals I never taught him?" His voice carried, calm but edged with something older than anger. "Then you need to hear where he came from." Briggs scoffed, but there was no conviction left in it. Hale's eyes sharpened. Morales leaned forward, attention absolute. Sarah stopped recording entirely, hands clasped in front of her apron as if bracing herself. Michael stepped slightly to the side, careful not to break contact with Ranger, and began. 14 years ago, he said, I was deployed to the Middle East with a joint task unit that doesn't exist on paper anymore. The words settled heavily. We worked nights, desert terrain, high-risk recon and clearance. He paused, eyes distant for a heartbeat. We had a K9 assigned to us. German Shepherd, black and tan, strongest dog I'd ever seen. Ranger's ears twitched. Michael's throat tightened. His name was Ranger. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Briggs's jaw set hard. Hale's breath caught. Morales whispered, "No way." Michael continued, forcing himself not to look down yet. Ranger wasn't just a detection dog. He was trained to move with us, think with us. He learned hand signals that were never written down, field adaptations, survival stuff. Michael lifted his hand again, slowly this time, repeating the earlier gesture, 2 fingers curling, opening. Ranger responded without hesitation, posture aligning with the memory as if time folded inward. Hale stared. That's an old combat signal, he said quietly. I haven't seen that since... He stopped himself. Michael nodded. Exactly. Briggs snapped. You're suggesting this is the same dog? That's impossible. Michael met his eyes. Is it? He crouched carefully beside Ranger, his movements unhurried, respectful. He placed one hand gently behind the dog's right ear and parted the thick fur. Beneath it, pale against darker skin, ran a thin, straight scar, old, clean, precise. That scar came from shrapnel, Michael said. IED blast. Ranger shielded a wounded teammate, took the edge of it. Hale stepped closer despite himself, squinting. That's surgical, he murmured. Not a street injury. Michael nodded once. He moved his hand down Ranger's shoulder, then tapped lightly against the dog's front left paw. Ranger responded by lifting it, just enough to expose the joint. Michael pressed gently along the bone. Ranger didn't flinch. "Microfracture," Michael said. "Healed wrong. He's always favored it when the weather drops." As if on cue, Ranger shifted his weight slightly, compensating. Morales' face drained of color. "Sir," he said to Briggs, "that matches the sealed file." Briggs stiffened. "You've never seen that file." Morales swallowed. "I saw a reference. Years ago, training database." Silence followed, sharp and uncomfortable. Ranger stepped forward then, slow and deliberate, closing the last inch between himself and Michael. He pressed his forehead into Michael's chest, the contact gentle but unmistakably intimate, like a soldier returning to a familiar formation. Michael closed his eyes. His hand came up, resting against the back of Ranger's head, fingers threading through thick fur. For a moment, the square disappeared. There was only heat and dust and the sound of rotor blades far away, and a younger version of himself kneeling in sand, laughing softly as a dog nudged his shoulder for attention. "I thought he died," Michael said quietly. "After the blast, everything went dark. When I woke up, they told me Ranger had been reassigned, that he was unstable, that he couldn't work with an injured handler." His jaw clenched. "I never believed them." Ranger made a low sound, almost a whine, pressing closer as if the words themselves carried weight. Hale looked between them, understanding dawning. "If he was reassigned," Hale said slowly, "he would have gone through retraining, new handlers, new commands." "And erased history," Michael replied. Briggs laughed again, louder this time, brittle. "This is a touching story, but it doesn't change the report. The dog attacked during a raid." Michael's eyes snapped up. "No," he said. "He didn't." Ranger lifted his head, gaze burning. Michael continued, voice steady. He hesitated. "Because someone ordered him to do something wrong." Morales' breath caught. "That's what the note said," he whispered. Briggs rounded on him. "Enough." But the damage was done. The crowd buzzed, whispers stacking like snowdrifts. Sarah shook her head slowly, disbelief and anger mixing on her pale face. "You labeled him dangerous," she said, voice trembling but loud, "because he wouldn't hurt someone?" Briggs glared. "Ma'am, you don't understand police protocol." Ranger growled, low and resonant, stepping back into his protective stance. Michael rose to his full height, one hand still resting on the dog's back. "He understands loyalty," Michael said. "That's the problem." Hale turned to Briggs, his expression hard. "Why is a dog with this history marked unstable instead of retired?" Briggs' eyes flickered. "Department decision?" "Whose?" Hale pressed. Ranger's gaze never left Briggs. The dog's posture changed subtly, less guard, more accusation. He took a step forward, then stopped as if drawing an invisible line in the snow. Briggs' breath quickened. "This is absurd," he snapped. "You're all letting a civilian and a dog spin a fantasy." Michael shook his head. "No," he said softly. "We're letting memory speak." He looked down at Ranger. "Aren't we, boy?" Ranger responded by nudging Michael's chest once, firmly, then turning his head back toward Briggs, teeth still hidden, eyes unwavering. Hale exhaled slowly. "If this dog is who you say he is," he said, "then the file is wrong." Michael met his gaze. "Or altered." The word landed like a dropped weapon. Morales stiffened. Briggs's face hardened. "You're accusing the department?" Michael didn't hesitate. "I'm accusing someone." The winter sun glinted off badges and phone screens alike, bright and unforgiving. Ranger remained pressed against Michael, a living bridge between past and present. The name from the past had been spoken aloud, and it refused to stay buried. Briggs took a step back, anger flickering with something else. Fear, perhaps, Ranger noticed. His growl deepened, not louder but heavier, as if weighted with truth. Michael felt it settle in his bones. This was no longer about proving who Ranger had been. It was about uncovering why he had been erased. And as the crowd leaned in, breath held, Michael knew the question echoing through the square could no longer be silenced. If this was the same dog, then who had decided to call him unstable, and what were they hiding? The change in Ranger was subtle enough that only someone trained to read bodies would have caught it, but once seen, it could not be unseen. The German shepherd no longer swept his gaze across the line of officers or the restless crowd beyond them. His focus narrowed, tunneled, locked onto a single point like a rifle sight finding its mark. Officer Briggs. The dog's black and tan frame lowered just a fraction, shoulders rolling forward, neck muscles tightening beneath thick winter fur. His growl did not rise in volume. It settled, steady and even, a sound stripped of emotion and filled instead with intent. It was not the sound of a dog preparing to attack. It was the sound of a dog making a judgment. Michael felt it before he fully understood it. The pressure of Ranger's body shifted, no longer merely shielding him from the officers as a group, but angling in a precise way that left only one clear line of approach exposed, and that line pointed straight at Briggs. Michael's breath slowed. Years of experience told him this was no random behavior, no flare of fear or confusion. This was selection. "He's not reacting to all of you," Michael said quietly, the words falling into the frozen square like dropped glass. "He's reacting to him." Briggs stiffened. His jaw tightened, the muscles along his neck standing out sharply beneath pale skin. He was a man built thick through the shoulders, solid and imposing, but in that moment there was a tension to him that went beyond authority. His eyes flicked, just once, to the watching crowd, then back to Ranger, as if gauging how much control he still had. "That's ridiculous," Briggs snapped. "Dogs respond to tone, posture. You're projecting." Ranger took a slow step forward, stopping precisely where the snow showed the faint outline of Briggs's last step back. The dog's lips never curled. His teeth remained hidden. His ears stayed forward. The accusation in his stare was unmistakable. Morales felt it like a cold slap. He stood a little straighter, eyes darting between Briggs and the dog, unease carving lines into his young face. "Sir," he said carefully, "I've never seen a K9 isolate one person like that unless—" He trailed off, swallowing. Hale finished the thought for him, voice low and steady. "Unless the dog recognizes a specific threat." Briggs laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that carried no humor. "You're letting a story get into your heads." Ranger growled again, deeper now, vibrating through the ground as if the frozen earth itself were answering him. Michael placed a hand on the dog's back, not to restrain him, but to ground the moment. "Easy," he murmured. Not a command, but a promise. Ranger did not break eye contact. His body shifted again, subtle as breath, placing himself even more squarely between Michael and Briggs. The implication was clear. Michael followed the line of that implication to its end, and the realization settled into him with a weight that felt both inevitable and terrifying. "He's not protecting me from the police," Michael said. "He's protecting me from you." The crowd reacted as one. Gasps, whispers, phones lifting higher. Sarah, the pastry vendor, stepped closer despite herself, her tall, slim frame tense, dark hair escaping its bun beneath her hat. Her pale skin looked almost translucent in the winter light, eyes shining with a mix of fear and outrage. "What did you do to him?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the noise. Briggs rounded on her. "Ma'am, stay out of this." Hale raised a hand, stopping him. "Let her speak," he said. "Everyone's watching." Briggs's face reddened, anger flushing beneath the cold. He turned back to Michael. "This dog attacked during a narcotics raid," he said, enunciating each word as if volume could make it true. "He disobeyed a takedown order. A suspect was injured." Ranger reacted to the word raid with a visible flinch, a ripple passing through his body like a remembered shockwave. His growl sharpened, no longer a warning but a statement. Michael's eyes narrowed. "Injured," he repeated. "Or exposed?" Briggs' gaze flickered again. Morales caught it this time. "Sir," Morales said slowly, "the report said the suspect fell while fleeing." Briggs's head snapped toward him. "You're out of line." Hale stepped in, his voice carrying authority earned over decades. "Answer the question, Briggs." Briggs's chest rose and fell, breath suddenly too fast for the cold. "The dog compromised the operation," he said. "End of story." Ranger advanced another half step, stopping with military precision. He was close enough now that Briggs could feel the dog's breath against his shin, warm and steady. The crowd collectively held its breath. Michael felt a chill run down his spine. Not fear, but recognition. He had seen this before, in other men, in other places. the way guilt announced itself not in confession, but in over-control. "You're lying," Michael said quietly. Briggs' eyes snapped up. "Watch your mouth." Ranger's growl deepened, a sound that carried something almost human in its condemnation. Hale looked at Briggs with new eyes. "Why does he only react to you?" he asked. Briggs opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time since the cruiser had arrived, he took a step back. Ranger matched it instantly, maintaining the distance like a living measure of truth. Morales' voice shook. "Sir," he said, "K9S don't hold grudges, they don't hate." Ranger's ears flicked at the word hate, but his gaze never wavered. "No," Michael agreed. "They remember." The word hung heavy. Michael crouched slightly, bringing himself closer to Ranger's level without breaking the dog's stance. "Tell me," he said softly, not to the officers but to the memory in front of him. Ranger responded not with movement, but with stillness, the deepest kind of communication he knew. His body was rigid, his eyes burning, his growl unwavering. This was not fear. This was recognition sharpened into resolve. Hale's jaw tightened. "Briggs," he said, "did you alter the K9 report?" Briggs' laugh came too quickly. "Of course not." Ranger barked then, not loud, not frantic, but sharp and precise, a single sound that cut through the air like a gavel striking wood. The crowd recoiled, phones shook. Briggs flinched despite himself. Morales stared at him, realization dawning with sickening clarity. "Sir," Morales whispered, "that bark wasn't defensive. It was accusatory." Sarah covered her mouth. "My God," she breathed. "The dog's pointing him out." Briggs' composure fractured. "This is insane," he snapped, backing away another step. Ranger advanced again, mirroring him perfectly, never crossing the invisible line that would justify force, but never relinquishing ground. The dance was unmistakable, predator and prey, but not in the way anyone expected. Michael stood slowly, his voice calm but unyielding. "What did you do during that raid?" Briggs' eyes darted, calculating. "Nothing you need to know." Hale stepped closer, authority radiating from him now. "I think we do." Ranger's growl dropped to its lowest register yet, vibrating through the snow and into the bones of everyone watching. The dog's posture changed again, not into attack but into a stance Michael recognized from training scenarios long past. Block and hold, prevent escape. "He's cutting off your exit," Morales said faintly. Briggs's face drained of color. He glanced toward the cruiser, then toward the alley, then back at Ranger. Every option narrowed. "Get that animal under control," Briggs shouted. "Now!" Michael didn't move. "He is under control," he said. "Just not yours." Ranger took one final, deliberate step forward and stopped, perfectly balanced, perfectly calm, eyes locked with Briggs in a silent exchange no one else could hear. Michael felt the certainty settle fully now, cold and sharp as winter air. The dog did not hate without reason. Whatever Briggs had done in the past, Ranger had seen it, smelled it, marked it in memory deeper than training or reassignment could erase. And as the square stood frozen under the sun, Michael knew the question that would not let go. What had Briggs done? Bad enough that a dog trained for war would stand against him now, in the open, with the whole world watching. The square had turned into a living lens, every eye and phone angled toward the same center point where truth no longer had anywhere to hide. Snow reflected the winter sun so brightly it hurt to look at, a cruel contrast to the shadows unraveling beneath it. Ranger held his position in front of Michael, body aligned and immovable, a living barrier that said enough. Officer Briggs stood a few steps back now, his authority fraying in real time, the set of his shoulders no longer square but defensive, as if the uniform itself had grown heavier. The crowd murmured, the sound like wind moving through dry leaves, restless, expectant, unforgiving. Sarah remained near the edge of her stall, tall and rigid, dark hair slipping loose from its bun, pale skin flushed from cold and adrenaline. Her eyes never left Briggs. She had the look of someone who had watched small injustices all her life and finally stumbled onto a large one. "Sir," Morales said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands, "we need to slow this down." He was young enough that the winter stung his face red, young enough that his conscience hadn't yet learned how to be quiet. His dark eyes flicked to Hale, then back to Briggs. "The dog isn't aggressive. He's controlled. He's indicating." Hale nodded once, jaw tight. The older officer's beard caught the sunlight, silver threading through the dark, his eyes sharp with the kind of resolve that came from too many long nights correcting other people's messes. "Briggs," he said, "I'm ordering you to stand down." Briggs scoffed, but the sound cracked. "You don't have that authority." Hale didn't raise his voice. "I do when an officer's conduct is in question." Ranger's growl softened into a low, constant rumble that seemed to underline Hale's words. The dog's attention never wavered. He took a half step to his left, subtly adjusting to keep Briggs boxed between himself and the cruiser, a textbook block that made Morales's breath hitch. "He's controlling space," Morales murmured. "He's not reacting, he's directing." Briggs snapped, "That's enough of this circus." He reached into his jacket, not for a weapon, but for something tucked deeper, something he thought would restore order by force of paper and seals. Ranger reacted instantly, not lunging, not barking, but tightening, a coiled certainty passing through him. Michael felt it through the leash and through the air, the way pressure changes before a storm breaks. Hale raised a hand. "Stop," he said. Briggs hesitated, then pulled free a folded report, edges worn, ink smudged from handling. He shook it like proof. "The K-9 attacked a suspect," he said loudly. "That's the record." Michael's voice cut in, calm and clear. "Read it." Briggs blinked. "What?" "Read it," Michael repeated. "Out loud." The crowd leaned in, phones lifted higher. Sarah stepped forward, boots crunching softly in the snow. "Go on," she said, "if it's the truth." Briggs' lips thinned. He unfolded the report and began, voice stiff. "During execution of a narcotics warrant, K-9 unit engaged suspect with excessive force." Morales interrupted, unable to help himself. "That's not the wording." Briggs glared. "It is now." Hale stepped closer. "Keep reading." Briggs swallowed and continued. "Resulting in injury. Handler attempted recall. K-9 failed to disengage. Ranger barked once, sharp, precise, the sound slicing the air. The crowd flinched. Morales' eyes widened. "That's false," he said. "The addendum says—" "There is no addendum," Briggs snapped. Hale held out his hand. "Give me the report." Briggs hesitated a beat too long, then thrust it forward. Hale scanned it quickly, eyes moving with practiced speed. His expression darkened. "This is a rewrite," he said quietly. "The timestamp doesn't match the operation log." A ripple surged through the crowd. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "You changed it," she breathed. Briggs' face flushed. "That's a serious accusation." Ranger's rumble deepened, vibrating through the snow like a drumbeat. Michael stepped forward, careful not to cross the line Ranger held. "You marked him unstable because he wouldn't do what you told him," Michael said. "You called hesitation an attack." Briggs' eyes flicked to Ranger, then away. "He compromised the raid," Briggs said, too quickly. "He saw something," Michael replied. Hale nodded. "Dogs don't invent context," he said. "They react to it." Morales' voice shook with anger now. "Sir, the suspect's injuries, those weren't bite marks." Briggs' head snapped up. "What did you say?" Morales swallowed. "The medical photos, bruising from a fall, no punctures." Silence fell, heavy and total. Ranger took one deliberate step forward and stopped, the space between him and Briggs now measured in inches. The dog's eyes burned with certainty. Sarah stepped closer again. "So you lied," she said. "You blamed the dog to cover what?" Briggs's composure shattered. "You don't know anything," he snarled. "You think a crowd in a sob story." Hale cut him off. "Enough." He turned to Morales. "Call it in." Morales nodded, hand moving to his radio. "Dispatch, request internal affairs, possible report manipulation, and false classification of K-9. The words crackled across the square. Phones recorded, breath steamed. Ranger stood immovable, a silent witness whose testimony needed no words. Briggs's shoulders sagged as the realization hit him that the daylight was too bright for shadows. He looked around, eyes darting, then locked onto Michael with something like hatred. "This is your fault," he spat. Michael didn't flinch. "No," he said softly. "It's yours." Ranger's growl dropped to its lowest register, a sound that carried judgment without malice. Hale stepped between Briggs and the crowd. "Officer Briggs," he said, "you are relieved pending investigation." Briggs laughed once, hollow. "You're taking a dog's side." Hale met his gaze. "I'm taking the truths." The square erupted, voices overlapping, questions shouted, 100 small moments of reckoning colliding at once. And in the midst of it, Michael felt a sudden pressure in his chest, sharp and unwelcome, like a fist closing where breath should be. He inhaled, but the air felt thin, brittle. Ranger sensed it instantly. His head snapped back toward Michael, eyes wide with alarm. He pivoted, breaking his stare with Briggs for the first time, pressing close, nudging Michael's leg urgently. "I'm okay," Michael said, though the words sounded wrong even to him. The pressure intensified, a hot line spreading outward. His vision narrowed, the bright snow smearing at the edges. Hale noticed first. "Sir?" he said, stepping forward. Michael tried to answer, but the world tilted. Ranger barked, high this time, urgent and sharp, a sound that cut through the chaos like glass breaking. The crowd gasped as Michael staggered, one hand going to his chest. Sarah screamed his name without realizing she knew it. Morales moved, but Ranger was already there, bracing Michael's legs with his body, refusing to let him fall hard. Michael sank to his knees, then to the snow, breath coming in shallow, ragged pulls. Ranger pressed his head against Michael's chest, whining softly, his body trembling with fear he could not hide. "Call an ambulance," Hale ordered, voice cutting through the noise. Morales was already on it. Briggs stared, stunned, the fight draining from his face as reality shifted beneath his feet. The winter sun blazed overhead, indifferent, as Michael lay against the snow, the truth finally out in the open and his strength ebbing away. Ranger stayed with him, steadfast, his earlier accusation replaced now by a single desperate purpose: protect, hold, do not let go. And as sirens began to wail in the distance, growing louder, the question hung over the square like a held breath. Would Michael live long enough to see justice finished? Or would the daylight take its price now that the truth had finally stepped into it? Michael woke to light first, not the harsh glare of snow or the sharp white of sirens, but a softened winter sun filtered through a hospital window, pale gold and steady, as if it had been waiting for him to catch up. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and clean linen, a quiet, controlled scent that carried no urgency. For a moment he didn't move. He listened. The steady rhythm of a heart monitor ticked like a metronome, patient and reassuring. Somewhere down the hall, a cart rolled and voices murmured, low and distant. Then he felt the warmth. A solid, familiar weight rested against his forearm, grounding him in a way no machine ever could. He turned his head slowly. Ranger lay beside the bed, stretched along the narrow space as if he had always belonged there, black and tan fur catching the sunlight in soft bands. His head rested on Michael's hand, muzzle relaxed, eyes half-lidded but alert, the way a soldier rests without ever fully sleeping. His ears flicked when Michael stirred, and his amber gaze lifted, steady and unafraid. He did not move away. He did not need permission. He was home. Michael swallowed, throat tight. "Hey," he whispered, the word barely there. Ranger's tail thumped once against the bedrail, controlled but unmistakably joyful. He shifted just enough to press closer, the contact gentle, reverent, as if acknowledging something sacred had survived. Michael let his fingers curl into the thick fur at the back of Ranger's neck. The simple act sent a quiet relief through him, a warmth that reached places the cold had owned for too long. The door opened softly. A woman stepped in with practiced ease, her presence calm and unhurried. Dr. Elaine Porter was in her early 40s, average height, shoulders relaxed beneath a white coat that bore the faint creases of long shifts. Her hair, a warm brown threaded with silver, was pulled back in a low knot, and her eyes carried the steady kindness of someone who had learned how to tell hard truths without breaking people. She smiled when she saw Michael awake. "Welcome back," she said. "You gave us a scare." Michael breathed out, a weak chuckle escaping him. "Sorry about that." She glanced at Ranger, eyebrow lifting with amused approval. "Your companion refused to leave," she said. "Wouldn't let anyone near you without a second look. Very polite about it, though." Ranger's ears flicked, unapologetic. Dr. Porter continued. "You experienced acute cardiac stress, combination of prior strain and a lot of adrenaline. You're lucky. Rest did the rest." Michael nodded slowly, absorbing the words. "How long?" "A few hours," she said. "Enough." The door opened again. this time more firmly. Officer Thomas Hale stepped in, removing his knit cap as he crossed the threshold. In the bright hospital light, the lines in his weathered face were clearer, creases carved by years of duty and nights spent weighing consequences. His salt-and-pepper beard was neatly trimmed, his posture respectful, almost subdued. Behind him stood Evan Morales, hands clasped, youthful tension softened by relief. Hale stopped a few feet from the bed. "Good to see you awake," he said. "And good to see him," he added, nodding to Ranger. Michael met his gaze. "What happened?" Hale's mouth tightened briefly, then relaxed. Internal Affairs arrived within minutes. The report discrepancies were verified. Officer Briggs was taken into custody. Morales stepped forward, voice earnest. "Evidence tampering, falsified reports, misconduct during the raid. He's done." Michael closed his eyes for a moment, not in triumph but in release. Ranger exhaled softly, a sound like a burden set down. Hale continued. The K-9 classification was overturned. An internal review confirmed the dog's conduct was appropriate. Heroic, even. He glanced at Ranger again, respect plain. "He's being retired with full honors." Morales smiled then, unable to hide it. "And transferred," he added. "Permanently." Michael opened his eyes. "Transferred," Hale nodded. "To you." The words settled into the room like sunlight. Michael felt it sink into his chest, filling a space he hadn't known was still empty. Ranger lifted his head, as if understanding the shape of the moment, and pressed his nose gently against Michael's wrist. Dr. Porter cleared her throat softly. "I'll give you some privacy," she said, already turning. "But take it easy." The door closed, leaving the four of them in the quiet. Sarah appeared at the doorway a heartbeat later, hesitant, hat tucked against her chest. She looked smaller out of the open square, tall and slender frame softened by relief. Her dark hair fell loose now, framing a face still pale from the cold but bright with something like gratitude. "I just wanted to see if you were okay," she said. Michael smiled faintly. "I am." Ranger's tail thumped again, approving. Sarah laughed quietly, eyes shining. "He never left," she said. "Not once." Hale nodded. "He didn't." Morales shifted, suddenly unsure of his place. "Sir," he said to Michael, "thank you for standing your ground." Michael shook his head. "He did the standing," he said, nodding to Ranger. Morales smiled, humbled. They took their leave then, quiet as they had come. When the door closed again, the room felt complete. Outside the window, snow drifted lazily from a pale sky. The city softened into something gentler. Michael watched it for a long moment, then looked down at Ranger. "We're done," he said softly. Ranger's ears lifted. "No more orders." Ranger let out a small sound, half sigh, half contented whine, and settled his weight more fully against the bed. Michael closed his eyes, feeling the steady rise and fall of the dog's breathing. Images came, not of explosions or shouting, but of early mornings and long walks, of snow crunching under boots and a familiar presence at his side. There was paperwork later, Hale had said. Forms and signatures and quiet ceremonies that would make it official. But the truth had already been written in the simplest way possible, a man and a dog choosing each other again. When Michael drifted back to sleep, the winter sun had climbed a little higher. Ranger remained, vigilant and calm, a guardian no longer bound by command or conflict. In the soft light of the hospital room, war felt far away. Loyalty at last had found its way home. Sometimes the miracle doesn't come with thunder or fire. Sometimes it comes quietly, through loyalty that refuses to forget, through truth that survives being buried, through a bond that even time and power cannot erase. In this story, justice didn't begin in a courtroom. It began with a dog who remembered, and a man who refused to walk away. Many believe that God works only through the mighty. But often, he works through the faithful, through those who stay when leaving would be easier, through those who protect when they are told to obey, through hearts that choose love over fear. Maybe Ranger was more than a dog. Maybe Michael was more than a soldier. Maybe this was God's quiet reminder that nothing built on lies can stand in the light, and nothing rooted in love is ever truly lost. In our daily lives, We all face moments like this, moments when doing the right thing costs us comfort, moments when loyalty is tested, moments when the world tells us to stay silent, but our conscience tells us to stand. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. We read every one. And if you believe in stories of faith, loyalty, and second chances, please subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next one. May God bless you and your family. May He protect those you love, guide your steps, and remind you, especially in hard times, that you are never walking alone. Thank you for being here.